Today's video is brought to you by my amazing patrons on Patreon. Priority deck requests and extended discussions are just some of the many perks you get for being a patron. Consider supporting the channel today. Welcome back to today's build. Whether you're just looking for upgrades or have no idea how to build this deck, I'll be your guide to this wonderful game we all love. Let's get started. Today's deck is the Plague of Playgroups. His name is Brimaz, and this is the Contagion Engine. In the past, I've made some shocking claims about decks that are often built around a single creature type. So before we get into the deck today, I want to talk about how to tell if your commander wants to be a tribal commander. Broadly, a deck is called tribal when the deck list has a large number of cards that either have that creature type or make tokens with that creature type. But there's a difference between a dragon tribal deck and a deck that just has some dragons in it. Let's turn to the commanders for clarity. A commander wants to be a tribal deck when its abilities scale well to large numbers of that creature type. It's not enough for the ability to merely apply to creatures with that type. Wilhelt and Sheila both have abilities that do not scale well to larger numbers of their creature types. They only need one in play at a time. Instead, Sheila asks you to play a bite deck. So let's test it. Does Elenda want to be a vampire tribal list? Does this ability get better when you have more vampires in the deck? Not especially, at least not any more than any other creature type. Instead, this seems like a sacrifice and control deck that might sometimes play some vampire payoffs. Now, let's look at a commander I get a lot of requests for. Does this ability scale well to large numbers of a creature type? No. It's just as effective with one knight in play as it is with 10. Does this ability get better when there are more knights in the deck? Not especially, since you can only ever reanimate them one at a time. Having 4 knights in the graveyard won't make this ability any better than having 1 or 2 best knights in your graveyard. You still need knights in the deck, but that makes this a reanimator deck that plays a few high-end knights, not a knight kindred deck. Let's apply this logic to Brimaz. The first ability doesn't get any better by going Y. Whether you spend 4 mana on 2 2-cost creatures or on a single 4-cost creature, you're still adding 4 power to the board on an incubator. The second ability doesn't get better when more Phyrexians die either. It only ever needs 1 to die at a time. But together, these two abilities create an environment where proliferating, which scales to the number of things with counters on them, gets better with a large number of incubators, because that's more sources of counters, making this an ability that scales to the number of creatures in the deck that trigger here. Since both abilities apply to Phyrexians and only one applies to artifact creatures, this means we're getting the most value out of both triggers when we have a large number of very low-cost Phyrexians. It's worth saying, though, how many creatures have been corrected to have the Phyrexian creature type as well, even if the printed card doesn't say it. To be sure, you should check through Scryfall for creatures with the type Phyrexian. Since our commander can proliferate once every turn and not just on our own turns, we're also looking for repeatable sack outlets. The last thing to keep in mind is just how mana hungry the deck is. We need to be able to cast our Phyrexians, yes, but the most resource efficient way to use our incubators is to flip them, attack, and sack them on enemy turns. So we'll also be on the lookout for ways to address the disparity between our mana output and enemy mana output. Because it makes more tokens, its tokens are bigger and don't require mana to become creatures, the Splicer is infinitely better than Essence of Orthodoxy, but both require way too much mana. Remember, we're incentivized to go wide with Phyrexian casts, not tall. Not to mention that splitting up your mana investment among more cards makes it harder for spot removal to ruin your day. The The Choir Master, on the other hand, just plays worse than it looks. If it actually proliferated multiple times a game, I might reconsider, but we don't usually attack with Brimaz. We have no reason to put him in danger like that, and he's a better blocker anyway. The Choir Master will usually only proliferate once, and that's not nearly enough to justify this mana cost. We'll be making these swaps. These cards are much more castable, but don't provide much, if any, of the utility we're looking for. The Harvester reanimates artifacts, but we're not sacrificing artifact creatures. Brimaz specifically cares about sacrificing Phyrexians. There might occasionally be some removal pointed at our artifacts, but we don't have anything we really want to get back badly enough to justify this. The Aspirant, of course, is a payoff when we proliferate, but isn't a source of counters, isn't a sack outlet, and isn't a source of proliferation itself, not to mention that a life drain payoff isn't exactly contributing to our game plan either. We'll swap them out for these. These interaction spells are so far below the quality we should expect from Black and White, which offer some of the best removal in the game. I suspect these are so popular because 2 of them were in the precon, and the other, Sunfall, was released close to when this was. But exiling every creature includes our creatures, and this is very much a creature deck. Board wipe should be one-sided. Instead, these cards will be a better fit for our needs, and even synergize with the game plan.
So what do our lands look like?
Since our need to fix mana is so small and mostly basics will do nicely, tapping for colorless is no downside in 2-color decks. And the abilities of Mirrex and Karn's Bastion aren't just relevant to our game plan, but flavorful. Next are High Market, and if you've got the budget for it, Phyrexian Tower. Both are sack outlets that are extremely relevant for addressing some of the weaknesses of the deck. The tower helps make up for our mana-hungry incubators, and Market gains us life to pay for the damage we're likely taking from not having many blockers up, as well as the modes on Staff of Completion, which doesn't just ramp or draw, but by destroying a Phyrexian permanent we own, it's even a sack outlet that we can use to get Brimaz to proliferate without paying full price for it, as well as redundancy without Brimaz. This card has it all.
So what's our timeline?
What we most want early on is a source of counters, preferably poison, but failing that, ramp is also a necessary component of our game plan, so don't keep any opener without both of these. Next, I'm most excited to play some Phyrexian sack outlets to eat our smallest incubators, like these cards, or more sources of poison counters. Because Brimaz requires so much setup, he usually won't be coming down until at least turn 4. But with Brimaz in play and some poison counters spread around, we'll start our Contagion Engine by sacrificing Phyrexians to refuel our game plan, and shut down enemy game plans at instant speed on enemy turns. But on our turns, we're accelerating past our opponents and putting them on the clock with Phyrexians that give out more poison, limit opponents, and buffing our team. Along the way, we'll protect our board, but especially its commander, with these cards. Before clearing out blockers and dishing out the last few counters we need to win. At first glance, this deck reads crazy. Brimaz can proliferate up to 4 times a turn cycle, and that will knock out opponents very quickly. But in practice, the setup required to get to that stage is extremely difficult to do quickly, and usually only becomes a threat around the same time many other decks do. One critical difference, though, is that poison and proliferate effects don't synergize well across different strategies, so it's likely you're the only poison player at the table, making it extremely profitable for the table to target you. Between that, how slow it is to set up our engine, how mana intensive it is to flip our incubators, and how much we need our commander in play to keep proliferating at that speed, this deck certainly plans to win by turn 10, but never before turn 6, and it's certainly not inevitable.
A very special thanks to all my amazing patrons.
When I started this channel, I wanted to talk about deck building decisions with my videos, but in practice what ends up happening is that I talk for 30 minutes about all the nuance of a deck, which is longer than I'm comfortable with posting to YouTube. Here, patrons can request priority deck techs, access extended discussions on their favorite decks, in-depth guides on complex game actions, and more.
So if you enjoy this content, consider becoming a patron today. One of the things my patrons have made possible is a special series of deck techs that I'm really excited to show off to you guys. When I finally get them all uploaded, I'll be giving away a special collection of altars and tokens that I've made, corresponding to each deck on the channel. For example, for the Merkle Lord of Bones deck, the prize is a set of double-faced altars of the most prominent cards in the deck, whose backsides are set in the constellation frame with updated text to show that they're acting as enchantments now. For every 1,000 views on each video, I'll increase the prize pool for that deck. All you have to do to be eligible to win is be subscribed to the channel.
Consider supporting the channel today. If you like this video, here are some of the decks I'm working on next, so if you like what you see, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any, and check out the playlist in the top left for more. Thanks for watching!